¿Cómo están hoy? I am so happy to see you and to have you back for another grammar lesson with teacher Catalina. During our last lesson, we covered direct object pronouns, and today we are covering indirect object pronouns. So again, put your thinking caps on and let's get into this together. Oh, wait, espera. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And now let's go. Just like with our previous lesson, I want to make sure that you understand what indirect object pronouns are in English so that you can use that previous knowledge and apply it to Spanish. You are already an expert at indirect object pronouns. We just gotta review them a little bit and get them into Spanish. So what are indirect objects? Indirect objects tell to whom or for whom the action of the verb is being performed. So to whom or for whom the action of the verb is being performed. So to put it in a little bit more simple terms, think about it this way. To whom or for whom something is done or given. Think about it again. To whom or for whom something is done or given. That will get us our indirect object. Here's an example in English. I gave Pepito my ticket. I gave Pepito my ticket. To whom did I give that ticket? To whom did I give that ticket? Pepito. So Pepito will be your indirect object. So now that you know how to find the indirect object, you probably figured out that we have to learn how to replace it with what we call an indirect object pronoun. So let's go over what are the indirect object pronouns we're going to be using to replace our indirect objects. Remember when we learned the verb gustar, to like, or something is pleasing to me? And we use not this subject pronouns, but some a little bit different. Those are the same indirect object pronouns that we are going to use now to replace our indirect object. So you already know the indirect object pronouns that we're about to go over. But again, make sure that you understand not only do we use them with the verb gustar, we are also going to be use them to replace our indirect object. Let's go over our indirect object pronouns that we're going to be putting on this side of the board. They kind of correspond to the subject pronouns, but remember the subject pronouns are used for verbs. These ones are going to be used for indirect object replacement and also for verbs like the verb gustar. So let's start and let's go over them. You're going to see that they are going to look extremely familiar to you. Like I told you, you already know them. So the first one is going to be me, and I think you know the next one. Good. Te. Very good. Le. Muy bien. Nos. Good. Os. And the last one is? Very good. Les. So those are our indirect object pronouns that we're going to be using to replace the indirect object. Me, te, le, nos, os, les. The same ones that we use with the verb gustar. But in this case, we're going to use them as indirect object pronouns to replace the indirect object. So how do we use indirect object pronouns? Well, I have a couple of steps for you to remember so that you can navigate through them. So let's take a look at the first one. To start you out, number 1 says, read and understand the sentence. It is extremely important that you understand the sentence that we're talking about or that you're reading about. So make sure that you understand what is the sentence saying. That's number 1. Once you know what you're talking about, let's move to step number 2. Ask yourself, to whom or for whom something is done or given. So again, once you understand your sentence or the topic that you're talking about, go to step number 2 and ask yourself, to whom or for whom something is done or given. Step number 3, once you figure out who, then you can figure out what indirect object pronoun you can use to replace that indirect object. So step number 3, once you know who, then in that case, find the appropriate indirect object pronoun, and now you know what you can use to replace that indirect object. And that, mis amigos, that's your answer. So let's apply what we just learned. Let's look at this example here. Nosotros, blank, compramos un postre a Estefanía. Nosotros, blank, compramos un postre a Estefanía. We, blank, a dessert to Stephanie. Step number 2, ask yourself, to whom or for whom something is done or given. So in this case, for whom are we buying a dessert? Estefanía. So now we know on step number 3 that the Estefanía is going to be our indirect object. So we have to replace it with the correct indirect object pronoun. Which indirect object pronoun matches Estefanía, which is an ella? That's right. It would be le. So the le is what will go on this blank. Nosotros le compramos un postre a Estefanía. Nosotros le compramos un postre a Estefanía. Muy bien. Word of advice. Just because you see nosotros, do not be tempted to use the indirect object pronoun for nosotros. As you saw in this example, nosotros has nothing to do with this. We are the ones buying something for Estefanía. Therefore, the indirect object is Estefanía, not nosotros. You have to match the indirect object to the indirect object pronoun. You can't pick and choose. You have to ask yourself, to whom or for whom something is done or given. Did you notice where did we put our indirect object pronoun? Yes, you're right. We put it in front of our conjugated verb. So, the rules from the direct object pronouns apply to the indirect object pronouns. There's 2 places we can put our indirect object. If we have a sentence that only has one conjugated verb, there's no questions asked. That indirect object pronoun goes in front of the conjugated verb. But if we happen to have a sentence that has a conjugated verb and an infinitive, which remember, it's a verb that has not been conjugated, they end in AR, ER, or IR, then we have 2 options. 1, we can still put it in front of our conjugated verb, or we can attach it to the end of the infinitive. Let's look at an example. Here's the example. María tiene que comprar un regalo para Pedro. María tiene que comprar un regalo para Pedro. Notice that we have the conjugation of tener, tiene, and then comprar, to buy, which is a verb in the infinitive. So step number 1, stop, think, and make sure you understand the sentence. María tiene que comprar un regalo para Pedro. María has to buy a gift for Pedro. María has to buy a gift for Pedro. Step number 1 checked. Step number 2, ask yourself, to whom or for whom something is done or given. María has to buy a gift for Pedro. To whom or for whom something is done or given. Pedro. Pedro is our indirect object. Pedro equals a he. Pedro equals él. The indirect object pronoun that corresponds to él is le. So now that we have our answer, we can replace Pedro with our indirect object pronoun, and we have 2 options since we have a conjugated verb and we also have a verb in the infinitive. So option number 1, we can put it in front of the conjugated verb, and option number 2, we can attach it to the end of the infinitive. Let's do both. So let's start with the first one. Let's put it in front of the conjugated verb. We could say, María le tiene que comprar un regalo. María le tiene que comprar un regalo. Do you know who is she buying the gift for? Yes, most likely you and I have been talking about Maria having to buy a gift for Pedro. So in this case, we know that le stands for Pedro. María tiene que comprarle un regalo. María tiene que comprarle un regalo. Again, the le was attached to the end of the infinitive, but we still know we're referring to Pedro. Is it okay to use one or the other? Yes, in this case, it doesn't matter. Most of us, Spanish speakers, don't tend to really think about it. Sometimes we use one and sometimes we use the other one. Either way, both of them are grammatically correct. But remember, if there is only a conjugated verb, where does the indirect object pronoun go? That's right. In that case, you have no options. You have to put it in front of your conjugated verb. Let's look at our last example together. Yo, blank, preparo unos sándwiches a María y a Pepe. Yo, blank, preparo unos sándwiches a María y a Pepe. So now, step number 1, stop, think, and make sure you understand that sentence. I prepare some sandwiches for Maria and for Pepe. I prepare some sandwiches for Maria and for Pepe. Yo, blank, preparo unos sándwiches a Maria y a Pepe. Stop and think. To whom or for whom something is done or given. Sandwiches, Maria and Pepe. That's right. Maria and Pepe are going to be the indirect objects. So Maria and Pepe equal ellos. And what is the indirect object pronoun that goes with ellos? Les. Muy bien. So that gets placed in our blank, which as you see is right in front of our conjugated verb. So our answer or our whole sentence says, yo les preparo unos sándwiches a María y a Pepe. Yo les preparo unos sándwiches a María y a Pepe. You got it! That's how indirect object pronouns work. Don't forget your steps that you need to follow so that you're comfortably finding that indirect object and replacing it with the appropriate indirect object pronoun. Remember though, if we have a sentence that has two verbs, one conjugated and one in the infinitive, that's the only time that you have options. In those cases, you can put the verb in front of your conjugated verb, or you can attach it to the end of your infinitive. If your sentence only has a conjugated verb, that indirect object pronoun only has one place to go, and that's in front of your conjugated verb. Don't forget to review those indirect object pronouns and make sure that you are practicing them enough. Felicitaciones! You did excelente. I am super proud of you. Now remember, when it comes to direct objects, indirect objects, direct object pronouns, and indirect object pronouns, all you can do is practice, practice, practice until you feel comfortable about how they sound and how to use them. That will come as a second nature as you get more comfortable with the language. So don't panic if this is a concept that you don't get right away. This definitely is going to take some practice and listening to it as well as using it as much as you can. And don't forget, this video is here for you to watch as many times as you need to or as many times as you want. So don't forget to like, me gusta, see that indirect object pronoun? That's right, me gusta, and also make sure that you subscribe so that you and I can continue to have these lessons together. Muchas gracias y te veo la próxima vez. Adiós.